This is Strange New Trek, a podcast about the life and times of Captain Christopher Pike. And now your hosts. Space, the final frontier. These are the voyages of Captain Christopher Pike and his continuing mission on the USS Enterprise. To seek out new life and new civilizations, and to boldly remake episodes of the original series that no one has remade before. Joining me this week to discuss the episode Equality of Mercy is my commander dog sitting here quietly chewing a bone, which I'm sure is coming right through the microphone, and our chief engineer, Chris Noonian, saying, "What's happening, Chris?"
Hello. Holy crap.
Quite the episode.
That was a ride.
Yeah. That was Star Trek TV right there, like turned up to 11.
Agreed. Yeah.
You know, I had some inklings going into this episode, what we were going to get, because I thought I recognized the Outpost 4 badge on the one guy in the trailer for the episode. And the plasma ball was completely recognizable. And they did show the wedding ceremony, the quote-unquote wedding ceremony, in the trailer as well. And I was like, this is going to be some version of Balance of Terror. I just didn't know quite how they were going to get to it.
Yeah, and I also, I knew that going in this episode was based on Balance of Terror. And like I was saying offline, if I'd have thought about it, I'd have watched it today before watching this. But, and I knew Kirk was going to be in there. So, yeah, like you, I was like, how are they going to do this?
Mm-hmm. They still kind of snuck Kirk in. They hadn't really leaked that he was going to be in it yet. I think a few people had guessed it, but for me, it was still kind of a surprise that they did it.
Well, see, that picture that we got a while ago, folks were claiming that was season 2. Maybe it was from this.
Well, except it showed Kirk and La'an on a planet's surface with La'an wearing red. And him with a different ship's badge.
Probably the Farragut.
Probably, yeah. Which I noticed he was wearing the regular Delta in this one too, I think.
Yeah, man. If they just stopped at Kirk here, I'm fine. It makes sense. It was good. I don't know, them introducing Kirk again in a different context. I don't know how that's going to play out.
For me, it's just all going to come down to how they do it. I'm sure there's a way I'll totally accept it. I'm also sure there's a way if they do it, I'll just look at it and be like, wow, okay, I take back everything positive I've said about you guys.
Yeah, I was kind of worried about that going into this episode, but I think they did it right.
Yeah.
I like the way they did it.
I love this episode. Well, to get us started, do you want to hit us with the Captain's Log? Captain's
Log, stardate 1457.9. The Enterprise is on the edge of the neutral zone, a narrow band of space separating the Romulan Empire from the Federation, a remnant of a treaty of 100 years ago when a destructive war was waged between our two cultures. Enterprise and the USS Cayuga are here to help the outposts that guard the neutral zone with much-needed retrofitting and supplies.
All right, so we have the scene set. We cut to Captain Pike in his quarters, where he is, of course, cooking, because that's what he does when he's not captaining. And when he's not captaining, Captain Batel, who was also there for a night over.
That was a pleasant surprise seeing her again.
Yeah, no, it was kind of nice they brought her in. And she comes out and makes some comment about him making spaghetti for breakfast when they had spaghetti for dinner. And then he points out, no, I'm making pasta mama. You see, by adding Parmesan and eggs and sauteing it, I can take ingredients that were previously used and combine them into something new. Which, by the way, if you've never had pasta mama, it is quite tasty. It is a way to handle leftover noodles quite nicely.
I have not.
Yeah, it's always worth doing. Batel compares the idea of pasta mama to what they're doing with the outposts, and Pike considers the outposts to not be as tasty as pasta mama. Captain Batel has heard rumors that the Romulans are developing new weapons, and Pike dismisses the Romulans as boogeymen. No one's ever seen one. Nobody's dealt with one in 100 years. They get blamed for everything that happens.
It's like the Cylons, man, in the reimagined Battlestar.
Kind of, yeah.
Similar thing.
Yep. And she points out that some of those things are actually their fault. And then she points out that she misses Pike's beard. And Pike thinks that belongs to a captain of a different era, but she says, well, that kind of suits you. You're a man out of time. She asks how he's holding up in general. He remembers that somebody told him he had better places to be, so he's trying to be there. When she asks how that was working out, he replies, you tell me. And that they do a little discussion. She's got a date on the other side of the neutral zone. He's not sure who it's with, and she says, not that kind of date. And he says, well, come back next week. I'm making osobuco.
Yeah, I've never had that, but every time I see somebody make it like on TV, it looks super good.
It does. I've never had it either, but it's one of those dishes. I'm like, one of these days I'm going to have that.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I like seeing Captain Battelle here. I definitely was not ready for the end of the episode with her.
No, that one caught me off guard.
A little bit, yeah. It's weird that seeing her in the first episode and then the last and nothing in between.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was cool seeing her again.
She's got her own captaining to go do, you know. So we're going to cut over to the conference room. Pike, Una, and Spock meet with Commander Hansen Osala of Outpost 4, who reminds them that the outposts were on their own, really far from the core worlds, and were having supply chain problems, and asks them how they plan to handle that. They go through a few different options. I do this once an episode. Spock adds that they would also receive a full complement of automated mining craft.
Yeah, and I've stopped correcting you and leave it in.
I've noticed that. I have noticed that. Yeah, Spike. Yeah. The door opens to reveal a young boy who's like super fanboyed out to see Captain Pike. He runs into the room, introduces himself. It's Hansen Osala's son, Mott. And for some reason, this name kind of jumps out at Pike. The kid's peppering him with questions. Pike starts to look kind of queasy. Hansen apologizes for what his son's up to, and Pike's like, no, I just don't feel well. He's fine. Here, I'm going to leave you with the most qualified first officer in the entire fleet, and our science officer, and I'm going to go stagger down the hallway now.
Yeah, that was a good scene. I like the way they did that. Although it's super weird to me that like these starship captains would make names for themselves like that. I mean, maybe not. But like Pike sat out of the Klingon War. Mm-hmm. Well, I guess he helped Discovery in season 2 of Discovery, so maybe that's where he made a name for himself.
Even back in the first season of Discovery, they mentioned him as one of the most decorated officers in Starfleet.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah. So it's not something that hasn't been part of this thing. They've hinted around Pike being, like one of the primo captains in Starfleet history, because I think they put his name on the screen with like Archer, Garth Vizar, and Pike are the three names, I think. I'm remembering back really far. I could be wrong here, but that's what stands out in my head.
So he's on the Mount Rushmore of Starfleet, huh?
Yeah, that's kind of what they were hinting at there, I think.
All right, man.
Yeah. So as he's walking back to his quarters, he's in a daze, and he's listening, or he's replaying in his head the incident on the training vessel in the future, and hears people shouting for him by the name Captain, which is kind of blending into Una actually chasing him down the corridor shouting Captain. She remembered that Mott was one of the names he had mentioned, and Pike, says, yeah, and he hadn't expected to run into him, was one of the things. He knows that 2 cadets will die in the accident that cripples him. He knows Mott's one of them. And then this is where Una points out again, hey, you don't need to do this alone. And, maybe there's a way around this. Maybe we can figure something out.
Yeah, that's been a theme with her. But as we'll see in this episode, nope.
There's not always a way.
Pike's not escaping this one.
Yeah, there's not. And the Klingons told him that. If you touch that, you're locked. You're set, They didn't say you couldn't try to fight your way out of it. They just said that this is what's got to happen or else.
Is that what they told him in Discovery? I don't recall.
Yeah, they were basically like, if you pick that up, whatever you see, that's going to happen. And if you try to get out of it, it's not going to work out real well. Spike heads back to his cabin and starts looking over the list of names of the children who are going to be in this future accident. Pike brings up a picture of Mott, kind of looking over his science awards and sports achievements. And Pike begins to record a letter to address Mott, saying that he was happy to see that he was interested in Starfleet, but he should know a little something about the future.
Yeah, you can't do that. That's not how this works. You got to keep that to yourself, bruh.
Yep.
Didn't you ever watch Back to the Future?
And to draw a point on that, he hears a voice say, you'll figure out how to say it. And Pike freaks out because he knows that voice. And it is Rear Admiral Pike from the future.
Oh, yes. Going back to the uniforms they started wearing in Wrath of Khan.
Yep. Did you notice some of the details on it, though?
Yeah, the sleeves are updated to similar to what they are now, it looks like. But, the general, and the pants look a lot different, but
yeah,
the general fit and function of the uniform is reminiscent of the Wrath of Khan era, so I appreciated that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just I like how they threw, and I've heard other people complain about it. I like how they threw Strange New World details on that uniform, though.
I don't know. The pants look funky to me, but...
Was that metallic stripe instead of just like a plain matte stripe on the side?
Yeah, and I even think in the Wrath of Khan, they were just like plain black pants.
They had a red stripe, but it was a matte red stripe. It didn't like stand out like their rank lines on their shirts, This was like a metallic red, yeah.
I haven't seen that uniform on screen in a long time, so it's been a while.
Yeah. And then, it was also kind of funny because I was watching it and I could tell there was something different about the sleeves, and it was before my brain quite registered that they did the patterns but had done them in metallic. So it looked a little wet and shiny.
Yeah. Yeah, overall though, I like the uniform.
Oh yeah, I was quite happy with it. Admiral Pike walks around the counter and picks up one of the knives, apologizing to his younger self, saying the room brought back a lot of memories. I also want to point out that the aging makeup they did on Pike here looked really good, and it didn't look like a lot of times when they age people in Star Trek and they look like they just smeared paper mache over their face.
Yeah, I was thinking about that too. It looked really good.
Yeah, it was subtle, but he did look like he had some years and some worry put on him, So Pike and Pike kind of go back and forth, with the younger Pike asking if he's ever going to get a word in edgewise, and Admiral Pike's like, "Well, yeah, I knew you were going to say that." Captain Pike says, "Hey man, I've been doing this job long enough to know that when somebody shows up in your cabin looking like you and says, 'Hey, I'm you,' you don't just believe them."
That's fair.
Yeah. That's like a daily occurrence in Starfleet, man. Admiral Pike proves who he is by mentioning Captain Pike's very first pony, who was named Sir Nasalot, who broke his leg in a rainstorm, and they had to put him down, and young Pike cried for weeks over this. Admiral asks Captain Pike if he's ever told anybody, and Captain Pike says, "No, you don't tell a tragic story that begins with a stupid name." And that's a good rule to live by. So Admiral Pike gets down to the point saying that the letter that the captain was about to write was going to wreck the future, and that Pike was trying to save the kids' lives as well as, save himself some misery. And he said that it would work, kind of, basically, is what he gets around to. That there's a cost, but it could work.
Well, obviously it worked because Admiral Pike is standing in front of him, not with a melty face.
It'd be funny as if at the end of the show they showed him all melty in the wheelchair and him taking off through the time crystal. Just like, oh, everything's back to normal. So Admiral Pike trying to explain to Captain Pike what's going on. He's like, look, causality is a little trickier than that. Mott was just the first domino in a chain reaction of things that would lead to catastrophic results, altering the futures in ways you probably couldn't possibly foresee. The Admiral points out that it's like end of the world stuff, but he knew the kind of man that he was, because he's talking about himself. And when he found out what the fate of the galaxy was going to be involved, he was able to convince the Klingons to let him show his past self what was happening instead of handling it the way they wanted to handle it. Captain Pike wonders how they wanted to handle it, and they wanted to handle it with a bat'leth. They were going to go assassinate him rather than let this happen. So we get back to the time crystals again, which are one of the touchier editions, I'd say, of newer Trek, but I don't mind them. Is that any goofier than warp speed? Not really. So now, using the time crystals, the world reshapes around him, and Pike suddenly finds himself aboard the Enterprise officiating a wedding.
Oh man, and here comes Balance of Terror stuff.
Yep.
That's how Balance of Terror opens up, with Kirk officiating a wedding, talking about wooden sailing ships.
Yep. Ever since the first days of wooden sailing ships, ship's masters have had. Yeah. What was funny though is like Pike is obviously, he's on his back foot here. He's like, oh, what? Hold on. Why are we, you guys want to get married, right?
Talking about wooden ships. Oh, Am I talking about marriage here?
And you guys, Mr. and Mrs. Whoever you are, you want to get married, right? So he's trying to catch up to it, and what's her name? Andrea Martine kind of tries to lead him back through some of the vows.
Yeah, kind of mirroring what Kirk says in Balance of Episode. Not even kind of, like, pretty much says the same stuff.
Absolutely, going through the same lines. Spock then calls from the bridge, giving Pike like a oh thank God moment. But Spock now calls himself number one. Pike is a little confused by this, and Spock reports that Outpost 4 is under attack by a space vessel of unknown identity. Pike acknowledges this and heads to the bridge. Pike arrives on the bridge. It's familiar but a little different, and he asks for a status update. Spock tells him that Lieutenant Uhura can brief him further. Now, did you notice that Lieutenant Uhura's dress was more or less a TOS dress?
You know what? I did not notice that.
Yeah.
I'll have to go back and look at that.
Yeah, more or less. I mean, it still had the black sides, but it had the stand-up pop collar that's like turned and asymmetrical, and it was kind of a nice little subtle thing. And instead of everybody's rank stripes on their sleeves being the same color as their tunic, now they're all gold. So a couple little differences that brings it a little closer to TOS. Pike sees a bunch of familiar faces. We have Mitchell and Ortegas, but he still seems a little bewildered and off-put. And then Uhura reports that Outpost 4 is reporting an attack, or was reporting an attack before the message terminated. Ortegas reports that they were 8 minutes out from Outpost 4. And, of course, we start seeing little signs that Ortegas is kind of getting the Styles role here, because she starts saying some very anti-alien stuff. I kind of glossed over this. Pike and Spock head to the ready room. I think it was just because Pike's like, hey, come here, we got to talk. And they start going over some of the facts. He discovers that it's 2266, 7 years from the present that Pike knew it was. He asks Spock for help preventing a terrible future. At first, Spock thinks that Pike is probably mentally unfit and he should relieve him of his duties and take over. But Pike offers to mind meld so he can see it. Spock reveals that the accident that should have crippled Pike would have occurred 6 months earlier and urges Pike not to command any differently than he would have normally. So basically, the only way to uncover the grim future is to live out the grim future.
Yep.
The Enterprise arrives at the broken remains of Outpost 4 and detects...
Oh, hang on. We skipped over some dialogue that I thought was hilarious.
Okay, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
So, what I find funny about this scene is Spock's basically like, since the accident never occurred, you're going to kind of have to remain captain of the Enterprise at this crucial moment. In the Prime timeline, some other captain would have commanded things differently.
Yes. First off, notice Prime timeline. Because while right now we're in an alternate, we have to go back and point out that Discovery and Strange New World happen in the Prime timeline.
Spike.
Yeah, Spike does.
Spike says so. Spock says so.
Both of them do, as a matter of fact, So they arrive at Outpost 4, and they detect only debris. Pike orders Spock to triple check, and Uhura reports the USS Farragut is closest. She points out to Pike that this is Lyan's ship. Uhura receives a hail from Hansen at Outpost 4, who reports that Outposts 2, 3, and 8 were gone, destroyed by an unknown weapon. Hansen believes the weapon was some kind of high-energy plasma, and the attacker had disappeared somehow. Now, I thought this was kind of interesting. Hansen, of course, was the name of the white guy who was head of Outpost 4 in the original TOS episode. Here they took a man that seemed to be of Middle Eastern extraction and changed his name to Hansen al-Salat, so that way you get the same guy with the same name in the same place. But you get to add a little diversity to the crew.
Yeah, nothing wrong with that.
No, I think it's a perfectly cool thing to do. Nothing changed because of it, and it just, kind of opened up the show to say, hey, you know what, everybody's part of the future here, people. Mitchell reports a warp signature incoming, and Uhura adds that they were being hailed by the Farragut, specifically her captain, James T. Kirk. Kirk greets his fellow captain and offers assistance, saying that they had received Outpost 4's distress call and pushed to Warp 9 as long as they safely could. Ortegas is pointing out that the attackers are Romulans, but Pike reminds her that breaching the neutral zone would be an act of war. Kirk suggests shadowing the Romulans on a parallel course. Pike calls for fake Kirk, and they go talk about his little brother Jim and kind of what he was like. And while Sam says, well, he's a pain in the ass, but he's also like one of the best captains they're going to have, and he doesn't like to lose. And they kind of set up some contrast between Kirk and Pike at this point, where Kirk definitely believes in a win-lose situation. Pike seems to always look for a win-win situation. We get a little sense of the difference in these two characters here. And I think it's here that Pike starts to wonder if he's supposed to protect the future from James T. Kirk.
Yeah, I had to laugh about that myself.
Yeah.
Like, nah, dude, you were supposed to witness what it's like without him in command, buddy.
Yep, you're reading the room wrong there, pal. Spock lets out word that he has found a transmission from the enemy ship, and they might be able to piggyback a line in and see what everybody looks like. To which Ortegas seems like, yeah, we should do that. We should see what these slimy Romulans look like. Uhura had detected a signal on an unused EM frequency bouncing off the comet Icarus IV directly ahead of them. It was encoded. Spock was attempting to decipher it. Uhura believes it to be from the enemy ship. Spock reports that the transmission was cut off, but they were able to make a copy, which he believes is the feed from the enemy bridge. Ortegas eagerly thinks this means that they will find out what the Romulans look like. Pike has Spock put the transmission on the screen. An image of the Romulan commander appears on screen, showing to have pointy ears. And so the way they shoot this is almost identical. So almost identical to the TOS episode. The eyebrow raise, the lights over the eyes, the really harsh lighting that they used, everything about it, the musical cues, beautiful. I loved every second of this.
Oh, well, my favorite part of that scene was the lead up to showing Spock here, where everybody's kind of looking at each other, and then the last person looks at him.
Yep. No, the whole thing was great, the whole way they laid that out. And because I'll probably forget to bring it up again, did you happen to think or notice that Ethan Peck was doing a much more Leonard Nimoy Spock here?
No. I mean, it still felt like his Spock, man.
Okay, I kind of was picking up on some things that made me think that maybe he was trying to play a 7-year-older Spock and reach more into that Leonard Nimoy territory.
Maybe. Well, the issue with, at least for me, and trying to figure that out, is you don't see his interactions with a lot of the other crew. So it was kind of hard for me to tell anything like that.
Yeah.
Now, the thing that I did find out of character for him was when Pike initially gets on the bridge, and like you said already, he's like Pike asking him for an update. And then he's just like, well, Uhura will brief you. Get out of my face.
Yeah, you talk to her. I'm going to sit here in your chair a little bit longer.
That seems, I don't know. I thought that was sort of reminiscent of Nimoy's Spock occasionally.
Yeah, there were just behaviors, the eyebrow raise, a couple other things that made me think that he had just he had probably watched Balance of Terror about 50 times and tried to incorporate what he could.
Well, I'm going to tell you, man, I stumbled across this video on YouTube, Strange New World versus TOS. Mm-hmm. Specifically, it's a cut of Balance of Terror versus this episode by a channel called Failing Frequency. I'll put a link to this in the show notes, but it goes, not every scene, obviously. It's only like 8 minutes and 45 seconds, but the scenes that it does show similarities to, it looks like everybody went through a lot to make sure that certain cues were hit, certain gestures and even dialogue were hit. Well, obviously dialogue, because if you've ever watched The Balance of Terror, you can pick up on some of the similar dialogue. But yeah, like they hit a lot of cues from A Balance of Terror.
Oh, sure.
And this supercut kind of really shows it in next to each other, like literally next to each other, so you can see how close the production team and the actors got it. Yeah, it was really cool to watch that. But yeah, so it was obvious to me that they spent a lot of time getting some of those cues from the original.
Yeah. No, they did a really good job. Now, I haven't actually gone back and watched Balance of Terror since I've seen this, but I've seen that episode so many times that the big things I could definitely tell were timed very similar, and you could pick out the areas
there are even a few small things, like the way Pike, roams around the bridge here and there, is almost exactly the way Kirk does it in certain spots. There's a scene where Scott is on the bridge. In the original episode, Kirk stops to talk to him.
Mm-hmm.
But in this episode, obviously Scott's not on the bridge, but Pike still hesitates for a second as if he were expecting somebody to be there, and then just continues on.
Okay.
There was a super lot of subtle things in here that were pretty well choreographed from the original. And like I said, if you watch, and again, it's like less than 9 minutes, so it's not going to take up too much of your day, but I really encourage everybody to watch this cut here to see side by side everything that I'm talking about right now.
Yeah, that sounds pretty cool. As the Enterprise and the Farragut approach the Comet, Captain Kirk beams aboard the Enterprise where he's greeted by his brother, Sam. They hug. Jim says it's quite the ship, which Sam points out that he's jealous. Now, Chris, here's the thing. I believe they never showed the Farragut in the original show, but I believe the implication was that it was a Constitution-class ship as well.
Was it?
I believe that was the implication. I don't think they ever showed it, and I don't know that was ever said for a fact. What did you think of the design of the Farragut in this episode?
It's very often that I don't like the not Constitution class ships, the way they look. Yeah. Apparently, the Farragut is a Farragut type ship. I don't know if that's changed. I don't know if that's new canon or what, but according to Memory Alpha, the Farragut is the flagship for that class of ship.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so they're not Constitution class.
All right. Yeah, I mean, the most they ever said about the Farragut was that Kirk was on board when Captain Garrovick was killed or something. Like, they said that back on TOS.
Yeah, and it took me by surprise that La'an was stationed on there, but I think I might have a theory for why, but we'll talk about that.
Okay.
Actually, in a little bit.
When we get around.
Well, it's coming up because La'an comes over too.
Yeah, she does. In the conference room, Pike notes a silence and points out that they won't get out of the problem by not talking about it. Kirk doesn't think they should wait and they should make a choice right now. Basically, they're trying to decide between what could possibly start a war and sitting back and trying something else. Kirk points out that if the Romulan ship gets back across the neutral zone to tell its people that they came through, blew up star bases, and a couple Federation ships showed up and sat on their hands, then it's going to look weak and the Romulans are going to start a war. Also a couple of racist shots here taken at Spock for looking like the Romulans, which Kirk actually has the best comeback to, that he says that he's like, look, it's suspicious not because they look alike, but because the Romulans know that humans and Vulcans are allies.
Mm-hmm.
And they just happen to let a piece of information out that they look Vulcan. This could have been an intentional play to drive a wedge between humans and Vulcans.
Yeah, or, well, I don't know if it would do that, but what I was going to say is, or to make the Romulans seem closer to the Vulcans, but the only person that seems to have worked on is Pike, who does not want to just go fire on them willy-nilly.
Yeah, I'll probably come back to this later, but it's kind of interesting to me that Pike, who had such survivor's guilt over being made to sit out of the Klingon War, would be pushing so hard to stay out of another war.
Yeah, but I mean, he also knows that he's not in his right timeline.
Oh, this is true, yeah.
And he thinks that he's here to save the universe from Kirk. So he is going to push back on whatever Kirk wants to do.
No, this is true. These are all very good points. I think Dr. M'Benga, who's really playing Dr. McCoy's role here, he's the only one who's really, besides Pike, really pushing to not go to war. Spock is for it, Kirk is for it, and Ortegas looks like she'd fight anybody for any reason in this universe.
Yeah, she's like borderline mirror universe Ortegas.
Yeah.
Like
that tiny little Spitfire is just spoiling for a fight.
Yeah, and this scene with M'Benga here is another almost word for word of what McCoy says to Kirk in Balance of Terror.
So Kirk suggests a plan to Pike. Hey, let's quietly tail this Romulan ship until we get it over to the Comet, and then we'll use that to lock our weapons on. And Chris, do you want to hit us with the captain's personal log?
Captain's personal log, stardate 1709.2. Per Captain Kirk's plan, we are mounting a pincer move. Our two ships will slowly drift closer as the Romulans remain unaware. When they pass through the comet's tail, giving us their exact location, we will be in weapons range. Kirk, however, has agreed to my plan to neutralize, not destroy, the bird of prey, leaving open the possibility of dialogue. And yet, I remain concerned this brash young Starfleet captain follows his own rules, and I can't help but wonder, is Kirk the reason I was sent here? If I wasn't here to stop him, would we be led into a war? Again, you're reading the room wrong, bud.
Yep. Yeah, just a little off on that one, pal.
Which is odd that he would be reading the room wrong, because Admiral Pike makes it super clear that when Pike made sure nobody was going to be where the accident happened, he set into effect a chain of events that was universe problematic. It just seems weird to me that he would think that Kirk is the continuing reason for this and not himself.
You know what I just got struck with here, and this is actually going to reflect on something that happens later. Hey, chill out, Commander. This is going to reflect on something that happens a little bit later. But you notice a lot of what happens in this episode is ego versus reality. The sub-commander on the Romulan ship.
Pike and Kirk.
So, of course, Pike gets here, finds out there's, galaxy-shattering repercussions to something, and he assumes it's not him, automatically, Which is kind of funny, because Pike is usually so ego-less in these episodes, Okay, so we'll have to look at that a little bit as we go here. Pike orders Ortegas to maintain present course, but be ready. She promises to keep her foot over the gas, just in case. So, as they are going around this comet, what they're expecting it to do is they're expecting the Romulans to have to pass through the tail as they kind of drift up on the sides of it, and they'll be able to open fire because they'll have a lock based on its interference with the tail of the comet. So as Kirk pushes up beyond that position to, be ready to catch it on the other side, they realize that the bird of prey is not there. And it has cut them off, and it has actually put itself behind the Farragut and decloaks and opens fire. Kirk orders an attack pattern of Tiberius 4, bringing the ship around to open fire on the Romulans. The bird of prey launches its plasma torpedo, which smashes through the saucer of the Farragut, disabling the ship. Kirk urges the Enterprise to fire phasers to draw the Romulans' attention. Pike is concerned about hitting the Farragut as well as being out of range. Spock speculates so it turns, the bird of prey turns to fire its plasma torpedo at the Enterprise. But I don't even remember how they did it. They moved themselves slightly out of range. That way when it hit, it only hit hard enough to cause damage and not to basically destroy the ship.
Yep.
Now, see, they did that by jumping into warp and outrunning it in the original series. I don't remember how they did it here. Pike asks for a status on the Farragut, and it is not in good shape. So he heads down to the transporter room where La'an is leading a group of survivors from the Farragut, and La'an is obviously second in command now because she has a yellow shirt, but her hair is down, and she's a hugger now.
Yeah, that was weird.
Yeah. Apparently those therapy lessons from the previous episode are paying off.
Maybe she stuck with it. Here's the part I was talking about earlier about the crew's reactions to Pike these days. So Pike asked La'an if she's spoken to Una.
Yes.
And that's when La'an tells him that, she's not allowed contact because we find out that she had been arrested. So it's been 7 years since that happened. Because at the end of the episode, obviously, we find out that Batel comes and arrests Una. So it's been 7 years, and Pike has done nothing, at least that we know of, to try to help Una. And I really think that's the cause of some of the divide within the crew with Pike on this.
I can see that, because I didn't really consider it during and after this episode until like a week or two later, where I was like, well, wait, if she was still like in the Federation pokey, did he do nothing to get her out?
Yeah, I mean, obviously it's not explained here, but that's just my guess as to why the crew has gone, well, with the exception of Spock, but why the crew has gone a little cold on him. Well, I guess Spock has too. Like, Spock was pretty snippy with him a couple times in this episode too.
But you know what I did notice is that Spock keeps calling him Chris, which he doesn't do during the present quote-unquote days of Strange New World.
No, I mean, he does do that to Kirk because they're such good friends. So maybe I'm wrong about the Spock angle, but I think that may be the reason why some of the other crew is kind of cold to him, because they're not like all familial like they are in the, Prime timeline. They're more, I don't know, professional and standoffish with each other in this alternate timeline. And I'm just thinking that might be why.
Well, it could be. It could be. Yeah, and that's one of those things you see, too, in the internet complaints is that, the bridge is way too informal. Well, first off, that's his command style. Sorry, guys, that's the way it comes through.
Hey, they'd be happy this episode with the bridge not being informal, because he like straight up yells at Ortegas to shut up. Yeah,
a couple episodes back, we talked about him kind of getting worn thin on her shit a little bit, and yeah, definitely here. Yeah, he's not a big fan of that whole thing. So yeah, you're right. They bring up Una, and he's surprised because in his time it hasn't happened yet. Kirk beams in. Kirk's not so happy with Captain Pike, and he demands to see him in his own quarters. Which I thought was funny. He's like, you follow me to your room. We're gonna talk this out right now. Basically, it comes down to, like, he looks at him and he's like, you blinked and now my ship's destroyed because of it. And then Pike's like, hey, your ship's destroyed and you're staying on my ship, which is in one piece, because I'm not a hothead. So they kind of work out their differences a little bit in, like, how they handle things. But Kirk is real big on pointing out, like, you got to make a decision and stick it through, not quibble and pause and think about it every second. You're going to have to be decisive and act at some point. And that is the difference between what happened here and what happened in Balance of Terror.
Yeah, because Pike's like, why are you getting all pissed off over a second's delay? And that's when Kirk is just like, well, tell me I'm wrong, bro, and I'll shut up.
Yep, and that was very much the case. What'd you think of Paul Wesley as Kirk?
It's different.
Yeah.
It's going to take some time for him to grow on me. Yeah, I mean, whenever I go back and watch TOS, I'm just reminded how much I love William Shatner as Kirk.
Oh, yeah. No, he's great.
It's weird seeing somebody trying to fill those shoes.
Yeah. I'm glad he didn't try to do an impression.
What, like I do when I'm reading the captain's log?
Well, yeah, but you're just doing the captain's log. You're not trying to carry a whole episode,
No, I mean, I wouldn't want him, I don't know. Shatner's just got that, I don't know.
Well, Shatner acts the way Shatner acts. That's a whole different thing,
No, you're right. And probably Shatner acts the same regardless of what character he's playing. But I don't know. His whole actor personality just goes real well with Kirk, which is probably because that's the main Kirk I've ever seen. But I didn't have much of a problem with Chris Pine because that's an alternate timeline. There was a lot of room for him to grow up different and act different.
Yeah, be a different Kirk.
Yeah, so I wasn't as concerned about the way Chris Pine played him. There was definitely some moments in this episode where I was like, heck yes, I see Kirk in here, and other times where I was like, I don't know.
I could see there were moments where you're like, yeah, dude's, he's not quite got the swagger, but he's getting it. He's getting close.
That's Commander Dog telling you not to swear on this family podcast.
Yeah, that's what that was, huh? All right. So Spock was able to get a scan of the bird of prey before it cloaked. It was trailing trilithium fragments, meaning that their power supply was damaged. They would not be able to return to Romulus. Its heading was still going to take it towards the neutral zone, but they could be overtaken now. Problem is, the Enterprise's phasers are down. They have no torpedoes to fire. Of course, Kirk points out that, like, hey, but the Romulans would know this. But then Pike's like, yeah, but if we roll up on them and then can't open fire, they'll figure it out pretty quickly. So, Pike goes, well, wait a minute, I got an idea. And then Kirk's like, well, what are you doing? He's like, I'm going to take a risk. So he opens the channel, calls over to the Romulan ship. And he kind of does a, hey, let's have a conversation, get to know each other, find some common ground. And so they kind of talk it out. They decide, okay, we're going to have 2 hours. And then we'll decide what we're doing from there. As the channel closes, Ortegas firmly believes that the Romulans cannot be trusted. They blasted the Farragut right in front of us. Pike quietly tells her to stand down. Ortegas keeps pushing. And then finally he just kind of loses it on her and tells her to stand down. Spock then reports that the Romulans have stopped their forward motion. Kirk wonders what they're doing, and Pike says, hopefully the same thing we are. Now we actually cut for the first time to the bird of prey. Very much the same sort of thing is happening on the ship has happened in TOS.
Yep.
The commander we find is war-weary and kind of sick of it all, but he's got a second in command who wants all the honors and the glory and the this, that, and the other, and who is calling his commander out basically in front of the rest of the crew. The commander kind of pulls him aside, and he's like, look, I've been doing this since before you were born, your uncle was an egomaniac. He just kind of starts going through the whole thing. And he goes, look, maybe, this might be a chance for us to have actual peace. And the sub-commander's like, well, what if it's not? And he's like, well, then you'll get your war.
I was just waiting for the commander to just punch the sub-commander.
Well, if I remember right, in Balance of Terror, what keeps happening is he keeps, cutting his rank. He's like, if somebody does something, he's like, you're reduced 2 steps in rank. Now get off my bridge. So we cut back over to the ready room here, and Pike offers Spock a cup of coffee. I actually like this scene quite a bit. Pike offers Spock a cup of coffee, which, Spock's like, oh, I do not drink coffee. I do, however, drink tea. And he's, oh, would you like a cup of tea? He's like, no.
No.
No. I thought that was kind of fun. It was just kind of a neat little thing to throw in. So Pike is kind of sitting there. He's kind of feeling like he's been knocked down a little bit, lamenting the loss of the Farragut and wondering how much this is really his fault. And I think maybe at this point it's starting to dawn on him what has happened here.
He's like, oh, wait, I was supposed to...
Yeah, okay. Man. I guess I wasn't supposed to be here.
Let Kirk do his thing. Dang.
So he asks about Una here as well. This is where we actually find out what has happened. And we find out she's been sent to a penal colony on Salius 6, where she has been for the last 7 years. Pike asks Spock why, and he's answered with her deception, but he seems a little confused there. Door chimes, and here comes Captain Kirk. Oh, yeah, I kind of left out this stuff here, too, about how Spock says, nobody can know the future until it's happening. And that Pike suddenly alludes to how they don't command their ship out of ego or something similar, which I think is the moment he realizes, oh. Now I see what's going on. And that's when, I believe Kirk comes in at that point. And Spock heads down to repair the phaser array in the Jeffries tube because he wants to handle that repair himself.
Oh, yes.
And we hear a familiar voice.
Yeah. Only the third person to play him, too.
Yep. Now, in Star Trek Continues, which is a fan series I don't think you ever watched.
Nope.
His son Chris plays Scotty.
Yeah, I do recall that.
Yeah. And the first time I saw it, I felt like I was seeing a ghost. It freaked me out a little bit. Pike heads back to the bridge, and the 2 hours is up. Kirk comes in. Pike's aware that Kirk wants him to change tack, but Pride was not something that they could afford right now. They're where he's mirroring the Romulan commander. Kirk admits right off the bat, he's like, look, I would have destroyed them, but it wasn't my call. They kind of discuss back and forth, and there's kind of a bringing down of the heat between the two at this point, too. They're kind of, I think, starting to see things from each other's point of view a little bit more.
Yeah.
And they try to figure out some way forward, and then Kirk, in a very conspiratorial tone, asks if he can borrow a shuttle.
Yeah, I was like, what's that all about?
And Pike responds the same way. He's like, Captain Kirk, what are you thinking? So, after agreeing to let Kirk use a shuttle, Pike heads back to the bridge, communicates with the Romulan commander, and asks if the repairs are finished. The commander responds by asking if Pike's crew has finished theirs. And this is where they kind of get off on a conversation about how they're both kind of sick of endless wars, but then a bunch of incoming warp signals are received.
Yeah, that was, I was like, whoa.
Yep. And we are suddenly surprised by what is basically a Romulan armada showing up. And the Romulan commander doesn't seem to be real happy about this either. Turns out his sub-commander had called for it.
Little weasel, man.
Yep. And here, I believe he slaps him in the face and has him thrown off the bridge.
Nah, he still doesn't hit him, but I wanted him to.
This would have been the time, yeah.
Every time that kid opened his mouth, I wanted him to get hit.
Oh, he was just like that smug little kid trying to beat up other kids and throw them off the toys at the playground.
Oh yeah, if this would have been on a Klingon ship in Next Generation, that dude would have been stabbed on the spot.
Yeah, they just would have shanked him. The sub-commander says that he thinks the Romulan Empire will prevail in an endless war, and that's when the commander's kind of like, well, that's the thing about an endless war. Nobody wins.
Yeah, dummy.
Yeah.
What's wrong with you?
The Praetor's flagship hails the Enterprise, and a female Romulan who appears on screen informs Pike that she was there to accept his unconditional surrender, that they're surrounded. And I actually love when she comes on and she's like, it's customary to kneel. And it's like, well, as I'm not a Romulan, I hope you'll forgive me.
Yeah, I like that. He just basically says that as a throwaway line. Doesn't even spend any time on it. Like, nope.
Yep, that's just not going to happen. So Pike, does he act like he's calling for reinforcements or something here?
No.
But then this is where Kirk jumps in.
Yeah, because he doesn't know that Kirk has done that.
Yeah. And Kirk jumps in with a bunch of ships of some make and model.
Yeah, I was like, what is going on here? My first thought was like, those look like cargo ships and stuff. Like, what is happening?
That was a good call, Chris, because I couldn't even identify them that far. I was like, what is this crap? Those all taxi cabs or something?
I mean, again, not to bring it back to Battlestar, but a lot of those ships looked like they were straight out of Battlestar, like cargo ships and stuff. So I was like, that's what they look like to me. And then they had the weird ones where the claws that open up.
Yeah.
So I was trying to figure out what those were, and I was like, I don't even think I've seen a ship like that.
A ship with its own forklift built in or something. Material cranes is what I was thinking, like those shipping cranes. For some reason, that's what I was thinking.
Well, in hindsight, now that you say that, yeah, I could see that for sure.
Yeah.
But I'm just saying at the time, at the moment I saw them, I was like, what in the heck is that?
Yeah. No, it was very weird looking. And so they go to a secure channel. Pike and Kirk kind of talking about like, hey, what are you doing? But the idea is that neither one have talked to each other in 100 years, the humans and the Romulans. So the Romulans should have no idea what a human warship looks like at this point, any less than a human would have an idea of what the Romulan fleet would look like.
Because to be fair, the Romulan fleet didn't see the Farragut, but they're staring at the Enterprise.
Right.
So that's why when Kirk says, oh, they're just like mining drones and stuff, I was like, huh. I bet the Romulans have cargo ships too and mining ships, and I bet they look similar.
I bet they're kind of alike, yeah.
I'm pretty sure that it might have given them enough pause to do what Pike does here, but I don't think it ultimately fooled them.
Yeah. So Pike kind of points out that he has some evidence that he can take back to the Federation of what has happened here, of the bird of prey ship coming out and destroying the outposts. And she has that bird of prey pull out in front of the Armada in between them and the Federation ships.
Yep, same as in Balance of Terror.
Yep, says that she's going to be calling. Pike talks to the commander of the crew, where we get a basically reenactment of the scenes between Kirk and the commander.
Yeah.
Where, it's just like, he's like, hey, we can beam you and your entire crew over here. There's no need for you to do this. He's like, it's not our way. And as he's talking to him, when he's saying our way, he's talking about him and Pike, them as captains, as warriors. Like, it's not our way just to, give up and surrender. It's, we have duties to perform, and this is the final duty. And then the entire Romulan Armada blows up the bird of prey.
Yeah, see, again, just like the episode with the kid, the first servant or whatever he was,
mm-hmm.
I thought for sure Pike was gonna not pay attention to his wishes and beam him over anyway.
Oh, ooh, that would have been nasty.
Yeah, I thought for sure that was going to happen.
If that had been what he would done, I don't know. It would have been like, ugh, that's kind of ugly, Pike. When you mention that, I don't hear that and go, oh, there's no way he would do that. I think, oh God, what if he did that? That'd be bad, because I could see him doing it.
It depends on if the Romulans could notice a transporter signal. Since they have not been around the Federation that much in 100 years, they may not be able to detect the transporter signal.
No, that's a very good point. The way the old Romulans were written, I would have to assume that when he got beamed aboard the ship and realized what was happening, he'd probably kill himself.
Could be.
Yeah, but now we're taking a lot of what ifs to get to this point, though.
This whole episode is a what if, so we're good here.
You know what? You're right. You're right. We can what if the heck out of this one. The Romulan fleet begins to open fire on the Enterprise. Pike orders evasive maneuvers. He calls Kirk to return to the ship, but Kirk's like, "Hey, hang on here. I'm going to buy you a few minutes." And he, positions the drone. I guess we'll call it the drone fleet. Basically, he starts trying to position it in between them and the Romulans to give them some cover.
Isn't that what Kirk's dad does in the Kelvin movie?
Basically, yeah.
Except obviously, Daddy Kirk doesn't beam out of there. He goes down with the ship.
Yeah. No, he stays in. It stays in to stay in the path of the weapons or something as he's getting ready to crash into it. Okay, so this is going on. Finally, they get enough cover that they beam Kirk back aboard, and then just as a plasma torpedo is launched, the Enterprise warps away. We kind of get a little scene here that's kind of a flashback from the Wrath of Khan. Because he looks around and realizes that Spock's not there, and then he heads to sickbay. They do a weird slow down shot of him moving into sickbay.
It took me a second to even realize that was Spock sitting there, man.
Yeah. As he goes through the room, we see Angela Martin is dead, and her fiance is there next to her bedside, which is the opposite of what happened on Balance of Terror.
Yeah.
He moves through the room, and he sees Christine Chapel, who looks like she is just shell-shocked.
Oh, man, that was tough to hear her spout all that stuff off, man.
And then, we get that even if there's something savable there, it's not much. We see Spock, his leg is missing. His face is severely torn up, almost reminding me a little bit of Pike's face after the accident.
Yeah, that's what I was about to say too.
Yeah.
That's definitely reminiscent of that for sure.
And then the Vulcan blood being green, the first shot, it's a little hard to tell what you're looking at because it's kind of uncanny.
Yeah, because I didn't realize it was Spock at first, but then once I realized it was Spock, I was like, oh, green blood, yeah.
And it just looks nasty. And I think at this point, this is, where Pike's going to be like, okay, so I see what happens here.
And the crazy part is he doesn't even know Spock's role in the rest of, we got the TOS show, and then we got the movies where he plays big parts in a lot of big arcs, man. He's obviously feeling bad for his friend, knowing that he basically traded Spock's life for his, and he doesn't even know how important Spock is to everything. And even Kirk, because Kirk may take over the Enterprise at this point. I don't know if this timeline continued, but it wouldn't be the same without his first officer Spock up there.
No, it would not.
Being rational with him when he's being super irrational about things. But yeah, I really felt bad for Chapel. Again.
No, that was a hard scene right there.
Yeah, the actress that plays her, I like the character. I like what she's brought to the character, but this scene right here just like kind of sealed it for me with her. Like, nah, she's good.
Yeah, no, the actress is very good. And I can't even hear her Australian accent like I can with most Australians that play Americans.
I didn't even realize she was Australian.
Yeah, she's Australian or New Zealander, and a lot of times with them, there's still like 5 or 6 words they'll pronounce in a very non-American accent, and I haven't picked them up with her at all. So we cut back to Pike in his quarters, and now Admiral Pike is back. And Admiral Pike tells younger Pike, he's like, and it gets even worse because as they were warping away, the Romulans broadcast over all channels that the Romulans were declaring war on the Federation. So this little event right here opened up an absolute war between the 2 points, as Admiral Pike is catching Captain Pike up on what some of the further consequences were. He says it's still going on to that day, so it'd be, years later, probably 15 years later, I'm guessing, just based off the uniforms. And he says that the best chance for long-lasting peace between the Federation and the Romulan Empire was lying on a biobed downstairs. So he points that out. Captain Pike opens the box with time crystals in it and summons Kirk, who asks if he was interrupting anything. And he says no and invites him in. And they kind of both have a moment he offers him a drink, and they both kind of have a moment like, I think I was supposed to meet you.
Yeah, that was a weird scene.
Well, I think, there was probably just a sense of there was some destiny there, because at some point, Pike chooses Kirk to replace him as captain of the Enterprise. And now we know it's because of this alternate universe when he goes back to our universe.
Yeah, because in the Prime timeline, Kirk had only met him like one time. Not so for Pike, though.
Nope. Pike asks Kirk about him, hey, tell me about yourself, as they sit down to have a drink together. And we get a quick drop, hey, I was born in Iowa, and then my father was the first officer aboard the Kelvin. And then it fades out of that. We cut back over into the Prime universe now. Pike is reviewing Jim Kirk's file to see who he was in this present time. Kirk is presently a lieutenant assigned to the Farragut, and his commendations are extensive for one of his age. There's also the mention of being a witness to the massacre on Tarsus 4. His door chimes, heralding Spock. Remembering what he saw in the time crystal vision, Pike expresses how glad he is to see Spock here, even though to Spock he had only seen him moments ago. Spock reminds him of how he left the briefing and his reaction to hearing Mott's name, wondering if it pertained to Pike's knowledge of his future. Pike replies only that the universe has shown him that some fates were inescapable, and even if he could get out of his, it might just fall onto someone else, someone he knew. Spock says he feels like he owes him a debt of gratitude, but he's not sure for what. Pike expresses how important Spock is to him, a feeling that Spock reciprocates, calling him Chris for the first time.
Yeah, man, that scene, 2 times in a row, I had a little tears in my eyes. This whole exchange just reminded me of, he doesn't obviously say it, but Pike basically doing the needs of the many speech, and then, you will always be my friend and that stuff. That's the vibe I got from what Pike was saying to Spock here.
Oh, absolutely,
it just made me tear up, dude. But it also solidifies why Spock would go through so many lengths in the menagerie to get him back to Talos.
Yeah, after this episode, you're like, oh, now I get it.
Yeah, I mean, because it's not really expounded upon in TOS. I mean, nor did they feel like they needed to, but stuff like this it makes sense because they have a really close relationship here.
It was a nice scene. I mean, it was, So Pike is kind of resigned to, he erases the letter he was writing to Mott. He has decided that, okay, well, I tried it. It was not going to work. And now it's just time to accept what's going on and move forward with my life.
But then he gets on the bridge smiling like a crazy person.
Yeah, everybody was kind of looking at him like, did you hit your head? You okay?
This whole scene was so cringy, dude. Just the way he was smiling to everybody. It was like, whoa, man.
Yeah.
Tone it down a little bit.
But then he gets a message that he and Una need to meet Captain Batel in the transporter room.
Yeah.
They head in. Pike greets Captain Batel. And she basically says, hey, sorry about this, but, and then she has her 2 security officers arrest Una. And he's like, what's going on here? And she's like, well, she's an Illyrian and she's lied about her genetic alterations. Pike's like, I don't care. And then he starts to actually assault one of the officers.
I saw that and I was like, wow, I guess you're lucky that Battelle is your on and off again flame, because I feel like if it was anybody else, they'd have arrested you too.
Yeah.
But at least Una stopped him.
Yeah. She's like, well, it's that it reminded me of The Empire Strikes Back, where it's like, Han Solo's like, Chewie, stop.
Can't do that.
So as Una tells him to stop, he lets go of the officer's hand because he was about to put like a serious wrist lock on that dude.
Yeah.
Battelle basically says, hey, I'm sorry, and Pike's like, yeah, I am too. This isn't over.
Yeah, and with that, I think their on again, off again relationship is permanently off.
That looks like an off again to me.
Yeah. Now, I mean, given Pike's character, though, I could see him coming back and be like, yeah, I know, you're just doing your job.
Well, yeah, Pike seems to have a weak spot for the ladies, maybe, You think about it, it's like, that Captain Tell shows up and it's like, all right, I'll cook you breakfast. And then that redhead shows up and he's like, oh, okay, you're from some weird, like, socially distant group, but come on over, I'll cook you breakfast.
He does like cooking them breakfast.
Yeah. Well, he knows the way to a lady's heart's through the stomach,
Yeah.
Yeah. Hey, so Chris, I know we've run on a little long, and Commander Dog's even getting a little stir crazy over here. Did you have any nits you wanted to pick this week?
Zero?
I have one.
Okay.
And it is stupid. You ready for this? Pike knows what the Romulans look like.
Mm-hmm.
Pike is the only person in Starfleet, the Federation, whatever, who knows that the Romulans are a cast-off race of the Vulcans. He never lets that slip in the next couple of years.
I mean, it might come to a similar head as the end of Discovery Season 2, where he saw that battle happen, but knows the Discovery was not killed in action, but has to tote the line because that's classified.
I forgot about all that classified stuff, yeah.
Yeah, I can imagine this whole thing might be too, once somebody gets a report from him. But no, man, I really love this episode.
No, it was
I know
great.
They took a lot of music cues from TOS. I really wish they would continue that, because it's kind of like the first episode and then maybe one or two more, and then this one like really felt like a TOS episode, but like updated and modern.
Yeah, I definitely will give you that. This show always seems to feel like it's somewhere between TOS and Next Generation.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Because it's more character driven than TOS was, but it's more plot driven than the Next Generation was.
Yeah, that's for sure.
Yeah. No, I thought this was fantastic. It was a great season ender for a 10 episode season.
Yep.
It was, would you say this was the best episode of the season?
100%.
Yeah, I think I would too. It was, it was just a strong episode all the way around. I did not dislike the actor they had playing Kirk. I thought he did fine. I thought a couple times he came through as Kirk, but again, I was glad that he never just tried to do an impression.
Yeah, I wasn't looking for that, but like, I don't know.
Yeah. It gave us a little strain going into the next season, but without dropping a whole like cliffhanger on us.
It is kind of crappy that we know Kirk's coming back in season 2 somehow. I really feel like they shouldn't do that, but like I said originally, Paramount has shown that they're, the show's in good hands, so they have continued to show me that over and over again, with the exception of the episode that shall not be named.
Well, and that's not bad. 1 out of 10. And it wasn't a bad episode. We just didn't like it.
Yeah, I know a lot of people on some of the Facebook groups were really liking it too. So, yeah, that's an us thing, not a show thing.
Yeah, that's they put that on us. Did you see any of the news from San Diego Comic-Con?
Man, I try to stay away from that stuff. But go ahead.
They have announced that there is going to be a crossover episode next season between Lower Decks. Yes.
Yeah, I did see that. Yeah.
I am really, really looking forward to that.
I assume it's going to be animated.
I actually could take the two, if it's just Mariner and Boimler. If it was just them being played by their regular actors, I would believe them because they look enough like their characters, and I would buy it.
Okay. Yeah, because I think putting an animated episode in here might be a little weird, but... Oh, so they're time traveling again somehow.
Yeah, that's the one downside, isn't it?
Well, I mean, they have to time travel again to see Kirk, unless he's... Well, no, he was in the seat with Captain Stripes, but then again, that could have been from this episode.
Yeah.
So we may see Kirk as a lieutenant, which, if we do see him again, I really hope he's just a lieutenant.
Well, I think he would have to be, just because, he checks... Pike checks his record, and he's lieutenant on the Farragut.
Plus, I really hope Pike doesn't meet him.
Yeah, I hope so, too.
Mainly because if what Kirk says is true, they only met once.
And it was when they handed the ship off.
That would have been at, the change of command ceremony to hand the ship off. Unless there was some crazy reason why Pike couldn't be there, but it seems weird that would be the case. I don't know. But again, Paramount has not steered me wrong so far.
No,
so
I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt. Anything you want to close with before we're done here?
No, except for the first season of the show has definitely set a high bar, and I hope they continue to at least meet that bar.
I think this might be one of the 2 best first seasons of any Star Trek show.
The second season with them, and it was good too. Now we get to have a second season with this crew.
This is true, huh? All right. Well, if you guys have any questions or comments or theories you want to run by us, hit us up on our website at strangenewtrekshow.com or follow the links in the show notes for this episode on your podcast app of choice. Please rate and review us, /like, and subscribe wherever you find us or listen to us at. It's one small step for you, but a giant leap for the show. I want to give special thanks to Miguel Esparza for the Strange New Trek theme song and Will Harding for his work on the YouTube page. Thank you for listening. Don't forget to set your phasers to sun and join us next time when we'll be on to the next planet of the week.
Oh, I am looking at Uhura's uniform now. It is very TOS.
Yeah.
Like, I like it.
Oh, no, I really like the way they put that together, yeah.
Oh, she's wearing something like Una, too, with the tights and all that stuff underneath.
Yeah. I
like that.
Oh, it's a way to, have that dress without having it look as hacked together as the old dress was,
I don't know, man. That skirt on Uhura back in the day.
Oh, no, I like it. And, should a woman show up and say, hey, I brought my own Star Trek TOS dress, I'll be like, put it on, I'll be out in 5 minutes.
Let me go slip into something more captain-y.
Yep. You got my wardrobe over here.